I'd like to begin new mini-series, Hilchos Brachos, and the Klolim of Brachos. Brachos is very important. You're supposed to make Mea Brachos B'chol Yom. There's very few things that Chazal put such a big number on. Mea Brachos B'chol Yom. And Brachos, what's interesting as a Hakdama is the Gemara learns in Brachos is probably a deraisa according to most of the opinions of how you learn the Brachos Lamed Hey. But it's a deraisa that doesn't explain how to do the deraisa. So it was the Anshe Knesset Agdola, which came along, and they gave a nusach. They told us how to make a bracha, and we're going to learn they're very particular about how you make a bracha. There's, according to many opinions, just to skip ahead, even if you can daven, let's say in English, you don't know Hebrew well, you shouldn't make brachas in English. Why? Because you can't be a mishanim b'matbeya shetavu chacham b'brachas. Because it's very important to get it exactly right. So I just want to start with the Rambam. The Rambam says in Hilchos Brachos, Nimsu comes out, it's halacha dal. Nimsu kol brachos kulan shloisha minan. There's three kinds of brachos. There's brachos hahanoya. There's bracha you make before you eat something or enjoy something in this world. Birchos hamitzvahs. There's brachos you make before you do a mitzvah, like before you put on tefillin or shek lulav. Birchos haidah, and birchos of thanks that you give to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shehein derech shevach v'haidaya. That would be included in that if you see if you see something marvelous, you see the yam, you see something very, very special in the bria, and you want to thank Hashem. So those are birchos haidaya. Those are the three kinds of brachos: birchos hanahanan, birchos hamitzvahs, and birchos hashvach or haidah. So says the Rambam, the nusach kol habrachos, the nusach of these brachos, Ezra ubeis dinai tiknum. These were all instructed and designed by Ezra ubeis dinai. That means the Anshe Knesset Hagdola. Vein roy l'shanoisam, they shouldn't be changed. Loy lahoisif alachas mehan v'loy ligroyam mimenu. You shouldn't add, you shouldn't take away. Maybe if you're feeling spiritually inclined or poetic, you'll want to add a bracha or make up a bracha or change a bracha. You can't do it. The bracha has to be the way it's said. There's such an interesting language which has to be analyzed at some point. The matbeya shetavu chachamim bebrachos einoi ela toya. You have to, and the halacha is that if you say a bracha wrong, which we'll define wrong, you have to make the bracha again. You didn't make a bracha if you didn't make it the way the chachamim said to make it. B'chol bracha she'ein bo haskar shem u'malchus. This is the first rule. The Gemara in Brachos Daf Mem Amud Beis says that you need to have two major components, which I'll say is really three, in every single bracha. You have to have Shem and Malchus. Those are the two that the Gemara says. Shem means you have to mention the name of Hashem. If you don't mention the name of Hashem, it's not a bracha. The second thing is Malchus. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech HaOlam. It has to have Malchus. Now there's exceptions to the Shemona Esrei is an exception, but that's what the Gemara says. And why do I say three? Because it has to be Baruch. You have to say Baruch. It's also because of that. It sort of like goes without saying in the Gemara that it starts with Baruch. So you have Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech HaOlam. So those three things are Chazal understood with their big chachma. That has to be said before you eat anything, before you enjoy anything, before you do a mitzvah. B'chol bracha she'ein bo haskaras Hashem u'malchus. If you're missing these two components, ain't a bracha. It's not a bracha altogether. You're doing something else. It's personal prayer, but it's not a bracha. There's a lot to talk about here, but that's the first yesod of the Rambam. Yesterday I mentioned the Divrei Chazal. They call him Mishana mimatbeya shetavu chachamim bebrachos eino elo toya. It's a Gemara which appears in a couple of places, but the sugi is in Brachos Mem Amud Beis, and it means that if you change from the matbeya shetavu chachamim, which is an interesting language, matbeya shetavu chachamim, the way the imprint of Chazal Matbeya shetavu chachamim bebrachos. They made the bracha a certain way, can't change. But on the other hand, there's some seemingly flexibility in this. It sounds like a very inflexible halacha. In other words, the Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. That's it. That's the way you say it. That's how Chazal figured out the right way to say it. The Beis Yosef brings Rishonim that ask, why is it that in Shmona Esrei, for instance, we say Baruch Atah Hashem Hakel Agadol Agibor ve'Anoira Eloirei. We don't say there every time in every bracha Elokeinu melech haolam. So it's not a matbeya shetavu chachamim bebrachos. So the Beis Yosef answers. Mishnah Berurah brings this, that he answers that Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu v'Elokei Avoseinu. That's already enough shem umalchus. Meaning when we say Elokeinu v'Elokei Avoseinu, especially since we say Hakel Hagadol Hagibor ve'Anoira, we know we're talking to Hashem. We know Lamim Avarchan, so it doesn't have to be exact. So here we see it doesn't have to be exact. At least when Chazal said it doesn't have to be exact, it doesn't have to be exact. Another case the Mishnah Berurah brings is the bracha of Elokai Neshama. Elokai Neshama, so that ends Baruch Atah Hashem what? Amachsir Neshamas Lifgarim Mesim. So where's the shame? Where's the shame of Malchus? So there isn't. So there the Rishonim asked the question, so old bracha, and the answer was, since we said Ato Yitzarta, Ato Verasa, Ato Nefachta Bi, so obviously we're talking about He who created us, and obviously we're talking about Elokeinu melech haolam. So we see that this that we say Kol Amashanu Matbeya Shetavu Chacham Brachos Eino Elotoya Lo B'diuk. In other words, they gave us a nusach. I don't say you should try this at home and start making up your own brachas. However, here's the key thing, that if you go back a number of simanim, the Shulchan Aruch is very, very clear about this, that tefillah, the brachos, says before, brachos b'chol lashon. You can make a bracha in every language you want, any language you want. You want to make a bracha in English and Spanish and French, as long as you understand the language. The Mishnah Berurah says you can make the bracha. Important halacha, if you make the bracha in Lashon HaKodesh, you don't even have to understand the language. But if you make it in a different language for your own kavana, so you have to understand that language. In other words, I can't just start making brachas in Swahilian or something because I think it sounds cool. It has to be a bracha you understand. But what happened to the kol hamashanu matbeya shetavu chacham brachos edo elotoya? How does that work? The Gemara in brachas learns this idea out from a story. The Gemara says a story that Binyamin Raya, there was a shepherd by the name of Binyamin, don't know who he was, Binyamin the shepherd. So Karich Rifta, he made himself a sandwich. Va'amar, he was in the field with his goats. So he made a sandwich and he said, Rich Rachmana di'oiv le'pita. Brich Rachmana Morei Dehai Pita. That's what he said. Brich Rachmana Amar Rava, I guess Rava was there, and he says, Yotzei, it's good, Yotzei. So from here we see, he didn't say Hebrew, he said Aramaic, Brich Rachmana, which was obviously his language, Brich Rachmana, Morei Dehai Pita, that was his bracha, and Rava said he was Yaitsev V'chein Halach, and from him we learn, from this shepherd, or from Rava's Haskama to this shepherd, we learned that a bracha can also be in a different language. So what then is the halacha of Kol HaMashanu Matbeya Shetavu Chacham? So as the Rambam puts it, if I understand correctly, the halacha is simply one thing. They have to have Baruch in the middle, and you have to have Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, Shem Umalchus. So Rachmana is a Shem Hashem in Aramaic, God, Rachmana. I think Rachmana means God. Morei Dehai Pita means God who's shoylet on this bread, or he's shoylet, he's involved in this world. That is Elokeinu, Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. Hashem Elokeinu is Ilu in the Shemayim, but that doesn't mean that he's acting every moment over here. No, Elokeinu melech haolam, that there's also an involvement in the world to the fullest degree. So what we have to say when we say a bracha is Shem Umalchus, that he's Hashem, which is so ethereal that we can't understand it, but at the same time, Melech HaOlam, he's right here with us in my bread. In that sense, Binyamin the shepherd did it well. He did it well, he did it in his language. So we see, I don't know that we have flexibility whenever we want to have flexibility. However, if somebody is new to Yiddishkeit or can't read Hebrew or can't memorize brachos, and they say, blessed art thou, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who gave us bread to eat, or whatever the last part is. L'chara yotze, that's a pretty thought out nusach that we have there. Baruch atah Hashem, blessed art thou, O Lord our God. Once again, I'm not recommending that this is the new way to make brachas, but it's an interesting thing that's a pretty, what you find there in the English Siddur is actually King of the universe, Melech Olam, that did what he did. So on this, the Shulchan Aruch says, Yatsa Yedei Chayvasa. It's always better in Lashon HaKodesh, because Lashon HaKodesh, again, if you miss one of the kavanas, one of the deep kavanas, you're Yotze anyway. There's something about Lashon HaKodesh that brings you to a higher place of Yotze, maybe because your neshama understands the Malachim help you out. There's a big question of why, but Lashon HaKodesh is always the best one. But if you want to say a bracha in a different language, or you need to say a bracha in a different language, so then you're Yotze Yedei Charvasa. Learning some klolim and Hilchos Brachos, and the very, very particular nusach that Chazal made for each bracha. A point here. Chazal, as you know, if a fruit grows from a tree, bar priya eitz, if it grows from the ground, bar priya adama, or mezonos, or hamotzi, very, very specific brachas. When it comes to the bracha of Shehakol Niyabidvaro, so it's not a takana on any specific food items. This can become very important. Meaning that a Shehakol Niyabidvaro is the other bracha. If you don't have a bracha, if Chazal weren't masakin, a bar priya, it's a bar priya adama, so a mezonos, so then you make Shehakol Niyabidvaro. It's like the catch-all bracha at the end. It doesn't have a list per se, as do the other brachas in Chazal. Nevertheless, Shulchan Aruch says all the things that don't fall into the category of bar priya, milk, eggs, water, salt, every chicken, you could a full keto diet is Shehakol Niyabidvaro. That's what it is. But it's a bracha that you make when you don't have a bracha, and I think we're going to see that there's some nafkaminas in it. One of the things that the Shulchan Aruch says is that if there's a Safek, so you make a Shehakol Niyabidvaro. Safek means, what bracha do I make on this? I don't know what it is exactly. Shehakol Niyabidvaro. The Rav Shulchan Aruch is very strict about this, and he says that Mishnah Berurah seems to agree also that a Safek means a real Safek. It doesn't mean you don't know which bracha to make, so you can make a Shehakol Niyabidvaro. Go learn Hilchos Brachos. What it means is that if there's actually, like, either the poskim have a Safek, or it's some kind of a botanical Safek, but then you make a Shehakol Niyabidvaro. In other words, you can't just be mevater. You can't just go away from the takana of chachamim and the matbeishet tavu chachamim brachas and just say, well, I'm not going to learn brachas on this. The Gemara says, my takante. What's the takana for a person? How do you know how to make brachas? You have to take a lesson. You have to take a course in this and learn how to make brachas. Otherwise, you're not doing the takana of Chazal of making a bracha. So the suffix has to be a real suffix, an actual suffix, either in the science of it or in the psak of it. In other words, the Chachamim didn't know how to. There's lots of interesting examples here, but maybe we'll get to it as to certain items that we didn't know what kind of a bracha to make. In general, though, if you have something and you don't know what bracha to make on it, the answer is not Shehakol. The answer is either don't eat it, or find a rabbi or Google it or do something to find out what bracha to make, or eat it b'toch hasuda. Those would be your answers. But to just make a shehakol, because I don't know what bracha to make on this is wrong. Nevertheless, the Shulchan Aruch says, you're yotzei. If you did do it, you're yotzei. You don't have to make another bracha. So if you did it wrong, why are you yotzei? And the answer is, very briefly, that there's two dinim here. One din is that aser anois mi'olam hazeh b'lei bracha. You're not allowed to take something, we have no reshus, to take something out of this world and have any type of hana benefit from it without a bracha. Okay, I made shehakol liyavadvar, I did something. On the other hand, we violated the chazal of hamashana mematbeya shetavu chachamim. So we were makayim one chazal, but we violated another chazal. And that's why you're not allowed to do it. It's not like lechatchila, it's a chomer to say the right bracha. You're not allowed to do it. You're not allowed to make a shehakol, go ask, eat it, as I said before, eat it at a meal. But if you did do it, l'chol hapachos, you were makayim the mitzvah or the halacha of not eating without a bracha. That part you did. You didn't eat without a bracha. And because you didn't eat without a bracha, it's not gazol, as the Gemara says. So therefore, you don't make another bracha. I'd like to take a minute to explain in Hilchos Brachos the Kavana. I mean the Kabbalistic Kavana. I mean what we're doing when we make a bracha. And I think this will help me and all of us understand many of the halachas that come out of this birchas hanahenin specifically, brachas that you have on hana. You know, Chazal say we're supposed to make 100 brachas a day. That's a lot of brachas. 100 brachas a day. Why did they want us to make 100 brachas a day? So it gets down to what we're doing when we make a bracha. And here's what I'd like to present for 1 minute. The Gemara says that the Gemara asks about psukim. It says in one place, Hashemayim, Shemayim LaHashem, Ha'aretz nasan livnei Adam. The Gemara asks about a bunch of psukim, like another place says, LaHashem, Ha'aretz umloya. Everything belongs to Hashem. So does this world belong to us, or does this world belong to Hashem? So the Gemara says, Kan koydem bracha, kan achar bracha. Well, it depends if you made a bracha or not. If you made a bracha, if you didn't make a bracha, everything belongs to Hashem. If you did make a bracha, so ha'aretz nasan livnei Adam. That's before in the Gemara, and the Gemara is ma'arich on this in different places in Paraketz and Mevarch, and this is the Nakuda. It means to say that we tend to look at a bracha as showing gratitude to Hashem. Thank you for the cake, or saying thank you to Hashem. This is not what the Gemara says. The Gemara is not talking about saying thank you. There are many places where we should say thank you to Hashem. We say Moda'ani lefanecha. The moment we wake up in the morning, we say Modim anachnu lach and Modim d'Rabbanan and Hodu Lashem Kitov. There's all kinds of places where we say thanks. Not a bracha. A bracha's purpose is not to say thank you. A bracha's purpose is to take Kodshei Shamayim and make it into something which is ours. The Gemara says, "Kol hanena min olam hazeh b'lei bracha kilu nena mikodshei shamayim." If you didn't make a bracha, it's hektish. What does that mean? It's hektish. It means it does not belong to us. We're not allowed to eat it. If you eat it, ikar amri, kol hanena min olam hazeh b'lei bracha mal. It's me'ilah, two sides of one coin. It's me'ilah. We're taking something that doesn't belong to us. A kohen at the right time in the right condition, b'tara, is allowed to eat hektish. What does that mean? He's allowed to eat stuff that belongs to the Shemayim. It's not that it's just set aside. It belongs to Shemayim. We're not allowed to eat hektish. If you're not a kohen who's tar in the right time, the right place, you're not allowed to eat hektish. Everything is hektish, meaning it belongs to Hashem. Now, what does a bracha mean? A bracha means that somehow or another, not thank you, but somehow or another an acquisition, there's a bailus, a kinyan, that we get from making a bracha. Let me just take it one step wider. What does bracha mean? What does it mean when the Kohanim bless us? What does it mean, bracha? Bracha means, hear me well on this, you're taking something from the Shemayim and you're making it part of this world. That's what bracha means. You're opening up a conduit, a pipe, and we're bringing Shefa and Shamayim into this world, the purpose of our creation, in a sentence. So when the Kohanim give us a bracha, they're taking something from Shamayim, they're putting their hands out, Yivarechecha Hashem v'yishmerecha, they're taking something from the Shamayim, and then they're giving it to us as a bracha. That's a big schus. Whenever you see bracha, when you bless your children on Friday night, what you're doing is you have a koach to take from the Shamayim, Kodshei Shamayim, this is a human koach, and make it ha'aretz nasan livnei adam. So what we're talking about here is bailus. That's what the Gemara says. Kan koidem bracha, kan la'achar bracha. Let me explain one more thing. The Gemara says, how do we know we should make a bracha before we eat? How do we know? So the Gemara says, well, the Torah says you should make a bracha after you eat. Right? Achalta v'savata uveirachta. So if you make a bracha after you eat, so kal v'chomer, you should make a bracha before you eat. So let me ask you, what's the kal v'chomer here? Like, is if you say thank you after you eat, so kal v'chomer, you say thank you before you get anything to eat? Why is it a kal v'chomer? At best, it's a chiddush. They used to say thank you before you even eat anything. What's the kal v'chomer? The kal v'chomer is this: that if the Torah is telling us a chiddush, that we have to open up the Shemayim and be kona bailus in something after we eat, well, obviously we should do so before we eat. Once we understand that a bracha is bringing bracha into this world, v'hayei bracha, v'nivrechu v'cha kol goyei aretz, all these places, wherever you see bracha, I'm convinced, wherever you see bracha, b'chol ha'torah kula, we're talking about taking something which was Shemayim la'Hashem, making it part of this world. So I wish everybody bracha v'atzlach. We've been discussing brachos, and specifically the bracha of Shehakol b'dvarei. A technical point, which is a big point, that there are two ways of saying this bracha in terms of saying the words, enunciating Shehakol niyah b'dvarei, Shehakol nihiyeh b'dvarei, nihiyeh. For many generations, I believe that the Sephardim said nihiyeh and the Ashkenazim said nihiyah. That's what the Magen Avraham says. That's the minhag. Magen Avraham says that we were taught, right? So we were taught to say nihiyah. But if you look at any Sephardic siddur, it says nihiyeh. Until the Gra came and he said, no, nihiyah is wrong. Nihiyeh is correct. And therefore, I just looked now, in the Art Scroll Siddur, it says Shehakol niyeh b'dvaro. If you looked last night at older Siddur, it says Shehakol niyeh b'dvaro. Now, what's the big deal? The issue is this: completely different ideas. World hashkafat olam. These are different worldviews completely. This segel and this kamatz to change everything. Because we spoke yesterday about when you're making a bracha, you're not saying thank you. You're being kona something from the Shemayim la'Hashem va'aretz nasan livnei adam. So until you make a bracha, Chazal knew this, Chazal explained this to us, until you make a bracha, it's kadshim. Shehakol nihiyah b'dvarei is past tense, like haya nihiyah. So past tense. So what we would be saying there is that Baruch Atah Hashem on everything that Hashem made. Made means sheishus, He made gracious. HaKadosh Baruch Hu made a beautiful world, trees, everything. Shehakol niyah b'dvarei, everything that you see, all the nature you see, is that which Hashem made back when He created the world. Shehakol niyeh b'dvaro, explains the Gra, is there's no reference here to the creation of the world. What we're saying is Amachadesh b'tuvay b'chol yoim ma'aseh brachos, that right now this is an ongoing creation. We are not referring when we make a bracha to the Say Shehakol. It's not just our time to reflect on the beautiful sky or the beautiful sunrise. This is not what it's about. There's plenty of time for that, as I explained yesterday. Modim anachnu lach, to say thank you for that. What we're doing right now is we're taking it a second by second. Like Nefesh HaChaim elaborates on the fact that the world is created second by second, millisecond. Everything you see now is because it's created right now. It looks the same, thank God, because if this would change from 1 second to the other, we'd all go crazy. So a table's a table, a solid's a solid, a liquid's a liquid, unless there's a miracle. That's teva. But it's an ongoing, like electricity, you shut off the switch all the way over there, the lights go off. It's ongoing energy, ongoing, and that's what it is. That's what Shehakol nihiyeh bidvaro. So when we say the bracha, are we making a bracha on the past, or are we making a bracha on the present and therefore the future? Or what are we doing there? And here, this is where the Gra says, it's all about the future. Look at the other brachas. Bara priya eitz. Bore priya eitz. Not bara priya eitz. Bore priya eitz. It's all about the present. And I just see in the Mr. Bird, I don't think gives an opinion on this, but there are Chashulchan Reish Daled Aleph. V'niya hayud b'segol shehu lashon hoive v'asid v'loy b'kametz shehu lashon avar. That you should be sure to say it, or Chashulchan, be sure to say it with a segol nihiyeh bidvarei. The chol brachos anu toivsin lashon hakolol ha'avar v'ha'asid. And anyways, mipnei shehashkachasa yisparach hitmidis b'li hefsek rega. What we're acknowledging or being mevarech at the time we're making a bracha is that Hashem stays with us. The consistency of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He didn't do this, what this Aristotelian thing of creating the world and walking away. No, he's here, Hashgacha Pratis. So Hashgacha Pratis is a big idea when it comes to making a bracha, and it's a really big idea when you change the kametz to a segel, changes everything. Shkacha pratis in that second. Continuing in Hilchos Brachos, I want to point out that the bracha, the Kavana of the bracha, is fairly complicated. It's important to understand. There are two tenses which are spoken about. There's nochach and there's nister. So it's simple understanding. Nochach is when I'm talking first person to somebody. How are you? And nister is when I'm talking about something. How is the majesty? There's minhagim. Sometimes you talk to a first person and third person. But it's interesting here with Hashem in the bracha. We seem to be doing both. We're talking nochach and we're talking nister. The obvious example of nochach is Baruch Atah Hashem, right? When you speak to your Rebbe, you don't say Atah, but when you speak to Hashem, you say Atah. You say you. That's an interesting thing. On the other hand, as the Mefarshim point out, you have Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. That's nister. You're talking about he who brings bread out of the ground, he who created fruit from the tree. That's called lashon nister. So you have a nochach and a nister together in one bracha. You also have, at the same time, the Vilna Gaon points out, Hashem Elokeinu. So Hashem is a name that we have no hasaga, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. In other words, we have no idea what that means. How do you put Hayehovah V'yeh above Taiv? It's not something which we understand readily. On the other hand, Elokeinu Melech Olam, that's our day-to-day life. So you have this combination, and not even in ascending order or descending order, this combination of nochach and nister, yes? So says the Rashba, this is what I want to share with you. He says, this is the language of the Rashba, Shnei Yisodos Yesh Aleim Nivna Hakol. There are two important principles in this world. Number one, Ladashuhu Yisbarach Mechuyev Hametzias V'shein Safek Brachos Lehakel. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu created everything. V'abei she'ein amitasa Yisbarach Musai. So one thing is, says the Rashba, is you look around, says, oh, Min Hashamayim Hashgacha Pratis, that's definitely created by Hashem. Look at the Nifloi Sabai, right? And it's something that we somewhat can understand. And the other, says the Rashba, She'ein Amitasa Yisbarach Musag. There's something about Hashem that we don't understand. We don't even attempt to understand. What does it even mean? So there's a sort of a nigla and a nister, a mysterious aspect to it, and a part that we can see. That's a Ki'im La'atzma Yisbarach. Only Hashem understands Hashem. However, what he does, nigla lakol, that we all see. So there's two aspects here. And on these two aspects, says the Rashba, since we need to deal not only with these two concepts, but with what sometimes can become a contradiction, what we see, what we don't see. But in order to get those two straight, kavu hanusach benigla v'nister. That's why the bracha is up, down, up, down, up, down. It doesn't even go straight, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. So it means to say, it's very interesting if you want to research the Gra in the Siddur, which comes from Avnei Eliyahu and Reb Chaim Volozhin and Nefesh HaChaim Perek Gimel, Perek Yud Ches, who say the opposites. Interestingly, or Rav and the Talmud say the opposites of whether Elokeinu is Nigla or Nister or Nister or Nigla. It's very it's not 100% a clear thing. But what is clear is this. What is clear is that there's two aspects to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's what we see and what we don't see, what we understand, what we don't get. And this is the Jewish thing, to be able to to incorporate both concepts at one time, 100 times a day. Every time you make a bracha, like there's what we see and what we don't see. There's what we understand and what we don't understand. And that, Chazal, in the Matbeah Shetavel Chacham Brachos, that's part of bracha that needs a Shem Malchus, and even more, that's a basic kavana that we have to have multiple times a day. Continuing along in Hilchos Brachos, modern Israel is a leader in the export and here of hydroponic vegetables. Hydroponic means that vegetables, sometimes fruit, are actually grown in water, meaning they're not grown in soil. That's what a pure hydroponic. And there's apparently millions and millions of bushels of vegetables, all kinds of sprouts, all kinds of herbs, even strawberries can be grown hydroponic and are. We're a leader. We're a leader in the technology and a leader in the export of it. So what bracha do you make on a hydroponic vegetable? Let's say you have a tomato or a cucumber, that's a hydroponic cucumber. So do you make a bari priadama because it's a cucumber, it's a vegetable, or is it impossible to say bari priadama if it didn't grow in the adama? It grew, it's bari priamayim. It didn't come from, there was no adama involved. This is a machlokas of contemporary poskim. Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, Olav Shalom, here in Yechavidas, Chelak Vav, Siman Yud Beis, is adamant that you make a Shehakol Niya B'dvarei, or Niya B'dvarei, you probably said Niya B'dvarei, on whatever is grown hydroponically, and he compares it to mushrooms. Mushrooms also grow without soil, and you make a Shehakol on mushrooms. Everybody know that? You make a Shehakol on mushrooms. It's not a vegetable. Mine, not exactly the same as mushrooms. Mushrooms is, I believe, it's a fungus. It's actually growing from the air. It's not growing from water. It's not growing from anything with the ground. Water is a little bit different, but that's what he compares it to. And he also compares it to the Chazon Ish. And the Chazon Ish says that if you plant something al pnei hamayim during Shemitah, you plant something in the water and during Shemitah, that's not an Isser. There's no Isser of Shemitah planting something in the water, because the only thing that the Torah said you're not allowed to do is plant in the ground. So that's how he paskins. Not everybody agreed with this. Rav Vosner writes the whole tshuva. Not like this. The Rav Sternbach has a whole tshuva. Not like this. He says if you're eating a cucumber, you make a bar priadama nekuda period. It's a cucumber. So you make a borei pri adama. It's a tomato. The consumer is not meant to look at, what the technology of it being grown is. That's not our job. So, what do you do? I don't know. I don't know. I do what it says on the bag. Usually it says on the bag, you make a shehakol, you make a adama. I can tell you that pardon me?
They connect them now. If you go to all these farms,
so I just checked last night. They connect some of them. There's a company called Shuva Grow. There's about 25 companies. One or two connect them in my research as of last night, speaking to an actual person who does this. So it's not some, but if it has a little bit of dirt, maybe that's a different halacha. I could tell you the OU, for instance, Rav Belsky, Olav Shalom, Paskin, you make a shehakol. If it's gadol al pnei hamayim, make a shehakol. Other poskim say you make a shehakol. Somehow, and the Chazon Ish apparently would have said that you make a shehakol, but others say you make a borei pri adama. The question is, let me just make it crystal clear. The question is, are you making a bracha on a cucumber in general, the family, or are you making a bracha on this vegetable? What are you saying over here? Are you saying, well, a vegetable is a vegetable, so it's a borei pri adama? There's a famous story. I don't know if it's a true story or not a true story, but it's a famous story anyways, that when Rav Moshe Feinstein, Olav Shalom, first came to the United States, didn't speak English at all, and somebody called and he said to him in Yiddish, what bracha do you make on a pretzel? Was for a bracha machmen. And he covered the phone and he said to his wife, was das a pretzel? So she says, Mezonos. So he said Mezonos. So that's a famous story. What is it? Is it a shehakol? Is it a adama? So I don't know. But you have to. The thing is like this: that from Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, I saw that he says that the truth of the matter is, how are you supposed to know? You're a consumer. How are you supposed to know, anyways, whether it was grown this way or whether it was grown that way? So Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says, quoted in this book. Rabbi Bodner, I don't remember, was on the table here, that Rav Shlomo Zalman said you should make a shehakol mi Safek. So there's a strong way to go that's made with a shehakol, unless you want to go be mevarer everyone and know how it's made, whether dirt wasn't involved, because whenever you have a Safek, Rav Shlomo Zalman said you would make a shehakol anyway. So that's the Safek of hydroponic vegetables. Continuing with Hilchos Brachos, here's a klal gadol bedin, very important rule. Gemara says it, the Shulchan Aruch paskins, the kol sheyesh by mechameshes minei dagan, if something has one of the 5 species, wheat, oats, spelt, etc., rye, so then you make a borei min mezonos before bracha, and ala michya or birchas hamazon as the after bracha, if it has it in there. The Mishnah Berurah gives it one caveat: it doesn't make any difference whether that this is this flour, let's call it flour, is an Ikar or a v'tafel. It doesn't make a difference how much is in there. Kol sheyesh by mechamishes minei dagan. Mishnah Berurah's caveat: as long as you can taste it. I want to point out something about taste that. What does it taste? Bread, when you eat bread, like wheat bread, it tastes like wheat. That's what wheat tastes like. A lot of people see it as sort of like, it tastes like bread. It doesn't taste like bread, it tastes like wheat. So as long as the taste of any of the 5 species is somehow felt in the meichels, so you make a borei min mezonos at the beginning. That means if you eat a piece of Schnitzel that was cooked in breadcrumbs, you make a borei min mezonos on that Schnitzel. Eat oatmeal, yesh by chamishus min dagan. You use oats as one of the 5 species. You make a borei min mezonos. If you'll take that same meichel that has the chamishus min dagan in it, and you'll turn it into pas, something that the world calls bread. Something called bread. So now you've just upgraded the bracha to the same thing, Hamotzi lech min haaretz. Very important thing to understand that the very same ingredients will be either, if you could taste it, a Bran min Mezonos, or if you upgrade it to make some bread out of it, so then you'll take it and you'll make a Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. I'm not talking now about the after bracha. That's another point. But what happens? But okay, so I brought you an example here. You can see. Here's a product called Eat Saint, an Israeli product, and on it says it's a Badatzei Decharedis product, and on it says that on this product, which let me point out here, is bread. So on this product, you make a Hamotzi lechem min haaretz at the beginning and a bari nefashos when you're done. So, like, interesting bread. I eat this bread. So how does it work out that this is Hamotzi lechem min haaretz? First of all, the answer is that if you look at the ingredients, you'll see that it has chameshes minei dagan. It's a small amount of chameshes minei dagan. It's gluten-free, it's carb-free, it's everything free except for the price. It has very, very little in it. So therefore, but it has enough in it, and that it has enough wheat in it, or spelt actually, in it, that you make a Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. It's as simple as that. It's pas. It looks like, I'm showing you the end piece obviously, but it would look like pas. And why? And this is a proclamation of the Badatzei Decharedis. Make Hamotzi on this. Probably you should wash also. Different discussion, but Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. However, even if you eat this whole bag, you won't get a kazayas of chameshes minei dagan in the whole bag. I checked. So therefore, you're not going to bench on this. Because benching requires a kazayas b'chnei Hilchos Brachos, which we'll talk about. So this is an example, a very important example of something which is no sort of kesher to benching, and it's not a regular a shtickle bright like we usually eat. I don't know if you're yotzei lechem bishra or not with it. You have to think about it, but you make hamotzi on it because it's not Shehakol, because it has chameshes minei dagan. It's not mezonos because it's bread. And so it's Hamotzi lechem min haaretz, unrelated to what the bracha achrayda will be. And this is something to look at everything you eat and ask, does it have any of the 5 grains in it? If it does, can you taste it? If you can taste it, it becomes a mezonos. Has it turned into a pas, whatever we're going to call pas in the future, into bread. Pas means bread. So if it has it turned into bread, then it upgrades to Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Yesterday, I spoke about the bracha that you make on Schnitzel. I think this was the most controversial thing that happened here since the elections. What bracha do you make on Schnitzel? So I just want to take a 3-minute deeper dive into this. And generally, I want to say that it's I think the confusion here, which I will try to explain, is based on your recipe or based on what you call Schnitzel. Based on what country you come from in a certain way. But here's what the Mishnah Berurah says. The Mishnah Berurah says, based on the Gemara and on the Shulchan Aruch, that kol sheyesh boi mechameshes minei dagan mivarchen alav bari minei mezonos or Hamotzi lechem min haaretz and birchas hamazon or ala michya. That means, the simple translation is, once it's got some flour in there from the chameshes minei dagan, you make a bari minei mezonos. That's what we're talking about, bari minei mezonos. If you turn it into a bread, it's Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. How much of that, what does kol sheyesh boi mean? How much flour do you have to turn it into a mezonos? So the Mishnah Berurah says, bracha rishona ein tzarich shir. That question of how much you need has to do with the bracha achrayna. You need a kazayis, because there it says in the Torah, v'yachalta v'savata uveirachta. There you need sphere. The bracha rishona, it's hana. So even if you take a drop, you stick your finger in the pot and you taste something, that's a mashu. You have to make a bracha rishona. Va'afilu amashu yesh levarach bracha ruya lo aisay min. So even if there's a drop, in this case of dagan, flour, so you have to make the correct bracha. Minei dagan, and when it comes to the chameshes minei dagan, the grains, chashivi, that's such chashiv stuff, bread, and they never get lost. Bishum gavni, in any case. Why? Kivan shenirgash taimon, since you can taste them. So tam doesn't get lost. The tam of bread or any of the 5 grains doesn't get lost. So even and as far as making a bracha on them, well, how important is it that I should make a Palate Cleansers on it? The answer is that that's something about bread, philosophical or halachic, there's something about bread and flour and chamisha smina dagan that says that even a little bit you make a bracha, so if it's there you make a bracha. Now, if you take if you go back in the siman, that's in Reish Ches, very, very clear. I just want to read you, just in case there's a worry that we're learning wrong shot. There's the Oiz v'hadar v'shabura kirvit kivan shenirgash taman, because you taste the taste of the bread. His translation is kivan shenirgash taman shel hadagan v'haisifu latavshel, and you added it to tavshel kidei lehatimai, in order to make it tastier, or kidei lisay lever, to make it more satisfying. In all these cases, it does not lose its bracha. Now, if you're making a Mezonos and a Shehakol, you ask, what is the Shehakol bottle? Probably, but that's not our question today. Our question is on the Mezonos. If you go back, this is in Siman Reish Ches. If you go back in Siman Reish Ches all the way to the beginning, here's where the Shulchan Aruch first says that if it has chamesh v'sminei dagan in it, you always make a bracha on it. And the Shulchan Aruch says, but there is an exception. There is an exception. This is right in Sif Beis. Aval, the exception is im nasan hadagan b'tavshel. This is the exception. If you put flour into your recipe for the sole reason of lidapkoi ulahakpoisai, if you put it there to lidapkoi or lahakpoisai, a little bit difficult to translate, but I'm imagining what it means is that, let's say you'll have a meatball, and the meatball, if you cook it, it'll fall apart in the pot. So you somehow or another you put some flour in there, and the gluten or whatever it is in there makes it stick together. That's called ladakpoi. Ladakpoi is a very similar concept to make it more gelled. So then, batal b'tavshel. So the Shulchan Aruch says there's one exception, and the exception is if it's ladapkai ulahakpoisai. Very, very clear in the Shulchan Aruch, and the Mishnah Berurah once again says, because in such a case it has nothing to do with lahatim shaloi ba, shaloi ba lahatim atavshel, because this is not coming to help the tavshel. And it's not coming for satisfaction. So it shouldn't fall apart. That's all. That's what it's for. Now, if you talk about a Schnitzel, so it really depends on how you define. I look in the different halacha books, and when I mean, in other words, the English farm, those that are quoting, they're actually talking about different mitzias. In other words, this ranges from putting a little bit of breadcrumbs there so it doesn't stick to the pot. That before Pam or whatever you use, that was an easier way to do it. I hope this is not disparaging, but I heard that Mir Yeshiva, I checked yesterday, they have a Schnitzel machine. So over there it's 25% flour. So in other words, it's just a little bit of of chicken and other ingredients and seasoning, and and there's it's fleischiks, but that's the extent of it. So it depends on what you want out of the Schnitzel. In my home in particular, if you would just fry a piece of chicken, it would not be called Schnitzel. It's not that it's there to stick it to the pot. It would not be called Schnitzel at all. The part of the whole geschmack is the fried crumbs. Now, it could be this has changed over the years, or could be it's maybe it's more American, like American fried chicken. It's interesting. The very same poskim that question whether you make a Shehakol or a Mezonos. By the way, this question is just because our grandfathers made a Shehakol. It's not because there's we're trying to justify the minhag, but like Kula Alma, it seems, as funny as it sounds, that, well, if you fry onion rings in breadcrumbs, for sure you make a Mezonos. okay? Because they're, like, you don't want the onions, you want the onion ring. It's a whole thing. If you go into a restaurant and you order onion rings and it comes without breadcrumbs, or you order Schnitzel and it comes without that beautiful thing on it, so you give it back. That's not what you want. You're not asking for fried chicken or roast chicken. You're asking for Schnitzel. So, I want to make one more point. So I'm not poskening with. I'm not poskening. I'm just doing a bit of a deep dive in understanding what you should do. I have converted from making a Shehakol to making a Mezonos. I can tell you but I grew up making a Shehakol like everybody else on Schnitzel, and then I understood that you make a Mezonos. Even quoted, by the way, for Rav Scheidberg that he says to make a Shehakol, it's not a correct quote. Rav Scheidberg said to make a Mezonos on Schnitzel unless it's there just to make it not stick to the pan. That's what he said. I checked this yesterday. But here's a question just for everybody to consider. You go out and you buy a falafel, pita falafel. Now, if you're going to start thinking about it, what are you buying here? Do you want the pita? Is the pita, you can so easily say, well, the pita here is really just a way of holding the falafel and the salad and everything else. So just make a adama or a shehakol or whatever you make on falafel balls and forget the pita. I'll ask you something different. Let's say you buy a pastrami sandwich. So you have 2 thin pieces of rye bread and 1/4 pound of pastrami. Now, let's say they say, oh, sorry, sir, we don't have the pastrami, so we're just giving you the bread. The bread is there in our culture, I believe. Not in the old culture. In the old culture the bread was the Ikar, the staff of life, and everything else was to make the bread go down easier. That's what it was for. This is not the case. This is not the case in a steak sandwich, and a hamburger, and a pastrami sandwich, and a falafel, or possibly in a Schnitzel. Because today, the Schnitzel, I can tell you myself, in my home, when there's stuff left over, first of all, it's breadcrumbs that are seasoned, and they have eggs in it. It's a whole recipe, It's not just, it shouldn't stick to the pot. And when there's leftover of that, meaning ran out of chicken, still have this. So I know my wife would fry that up for the kids. Just so it's a meichel bifnei atzmai if you are so inclined. So the question is, like, if we think about it logically and realistically, what are the breadcrumbs on the Schnitzel? So first of all, think about your das, if it's part of the recipe or if it's just there lidabek, which is the only exception in the Shulchan Aruch. Think about what most people do, and then make the correct bracha. Good morning. Moving along from Schnitzel, have a Mishnah in Brachos. Heviu lefanav maliach, if you are being served maliach. So maliach means something salty, but it could a piece of herring. But Rashi says kol davar maluach. Included in that, if you look in the Rishonim, is anything which is, let's say, a hot pepper, or something which requires something else to chase it, to get it down. So heviu lefanav maliach tchila. Heviu lefanav maliach tchila upas imai. And then there's some bread there. So the bread, a mevarich al maliach upaiter es hapas. You make a bracha on the herring, you don't make a bracha on the bread. That's a great halacha. So meaning, when I was a child in shul every day, little kids, so European people, and it was a clear minhag. I don't remember if we're not taking place, probably Tisha B'Av or something. But after davening, they made a l'chaim on some scotch or whatever they were drinking there, and then immediately a cracker, tam, immediately a cracker. And on the cracker, they taught me as a child, you don't make a bracha on that cracker. The cracker is a part of the schnapps. So then one of the chashuva people there told me that in general, api Kabbalah, the last word of davening is supposed to be b'dvarei. So that's why you don't make a Bran and Mezonos afterwards. But the point is this. The point is it's a Mishnah. The Mishnah says that if you're eating the cracker in order to make the herring not irritate your throat, go down, whatever they thought or they think today is the purpose of it, so you don't make an extra bracha because that whole cracker is all about the herring or the schnapps. The same thing. Schnapps could be rough, so by taking a herring, you're soothing out the schnapps. Now the Shulchan Aruch brings this and says it as follows: Kol shehu ikar v'tafel. A quote from the Mishnah, really. Anytime you eat an ikar, and with it, we're going to have to look at the words because there's a lot of cases where these words don't. It's not that you're eating an ikar and a tafel. Kol shehu ikar v'tafel. In other words, in its eating, there's something. Tefela means something unimportant or something which is really there only to be part of the ikar. So mivarech al ikar upaiter es hatfela, as opposed to not necessarily the case where, okay, we're having some, let's say we have a little l'chaim here in the morning, so we have schnapps, we have some cake, we have some rugelach, when somebody has yard site. So you can't say, well, I'm only eating the rugelach because I want to drink the schnapps. That doesn't work that way. We're talking about a real professional l'chaim maker. So you take a l'chaim, and right away the cracker. So that cracker, says the Shulchan Aruch, you don't make a bracha. Kol shu ikar v'imay tefela, nevarech al ikar upaiter es hatfela. Klal gadol b'din. Very important part of this. Bein mi bracha shelafaneha, bein mi bracha shelachreha. That means to say something spectacular. Even if you'll eat a kazayas of those crackers after the herring, so you don't make a bracha achrein either. But why not? Why don't you make it? Why shouldn't you make a bracha achrein? The answer is, what it seems to be, is that since it's tuffle, just like you don't look at a recipe and say, oh, it has, we certain things we say, but you don't make separate brachas on everything in it because it's tuffle to the recipe. It's part of the recipe. This is as if you didn't eat it. Meaning, the only thing you did was eat the herring. Herring requires a cracker, so but therefore you don't make not only not a bracha rishayda, but kiddush you make a bracha achrayda. One last thing, just to explain it, this idea before we get into it, is the words of the Rav Shulchan Aruch. He says, "Kol shu ikar she'ikar achilasei hu mimin echad." What am I eating right now? I'm eating one thing, herring, let's say. What am I out to eat? V'im lo ha'yochel min zeh. If I would not be eating herring right now or drinking schnapps or whatever it is that eating peppers, I would never eat a cracker. This cracker is simply coming to take care of my alcohol or to take care of my herring. That's what it's for. Meaning, so we're talking about Ikar V'tafel, says the Rav Shulchan Aruch. There's a nuance here. We're talking about things that the second item you would never eat. I'm only eating this because this is the way you eat. This is the way you eat herring. If I would eat it separately, like for instance in our l'chaims over here, so then of course you make a bracha. But Ikar V'tafel, just to make it to synopsize as best as I can, Ikar V'tafel means that it becomes one food. It becomes all one food. This is the way, like a fork. The cracker is like a fork. You're eating the cracker to eat the maliach, therefore it requires no bracha. Even if you eat a kazayis of it, even if you, no matter how much you eat, it doesn't make a difference. As long as it's for the herring, you don't make any bracha. Loy l'fana v'loy la'achra. We'll continue. In Hilchos Brachos, we've entered into in halacha complex area, which is the area of Ikar V'tafel. Ikar V'tafel, as I've explained, means that if you're eating two pieces of food or even two parts of a food, and one is more important than the other, one is the main thing, one is is just there. So then you make a bracha. I say you spread butter on your bread, or on a cracker. So you'd make a bar min Mezonos. You're not making a bracha on the butter. That's Ikar V'tafel. It goes so far. We learned, as the Mishnah says in Brachos Mem Aleph, that even bread can become a tafel if its purpose is to make a piece of herring or something salty or something very sharp more digestible or easier to eat. So you take a piece of herring and you have a cracker as a chaser. That's a could be you don't make a bracha and you just make the shehakol on the herring. The king of all, Ikar V'tafel, Rashi explains, is you eat bread at the beginning of a meal and you don't make any brachas at all. That's not a different halacha. Rashi says that is the din of Ikar V'tafel. Everything that you're eating in the meal tonight, the whole Shabbos meal, from beginning to almost to end, is part of your meal, the soup, the fish, the chicken, etc., whatever you eat. So that's the king of Ikar V'tafel. And it's interesting because the Shulchan Aruch, when he in Kuvayin Zayin, when he presents this halacha, he says it the following way: Dvarim haboyim b'toich hasuda. Anything that comes within a suda, which is what we're talking about. Imheim dvarim haboyim machmas hasuda. If there are things that come because this is how you eat the suda, v'hainu, which means dvarim shederach likvaya suda aleim, normal supper items, normal things that you would eat for a suda, as opposed to a snack item. And says the Shulchan Aruch, another condition, lalapes ba bahemes hapas, and it comes to now lalapes is a very sticky word. Lalapes probably means something like to dip. Lalapes bahemes hapas. It comes to dip your bread in. Kigon, and he gives example: basar, dogim, beitzim, yerakos, gvina, daisa, meluchim, all the things that we eat. In those cases, says the Shulchan Aruch, afilu eichlam b'loy pas ein tunin bracha lifneim. Even if you're not actually eating bread with it, the bread took care of it. The bread of the bracha on the bread took care of it. We all know this. Tonight we're all going to wash. We're going to make Hamotzi lechem and arts, and that's it. You're not going to make any more brachas. Now the only thing is that the Shulchan Aruch says that it's coming lalapes bahenes hapas, which is the lashon of the Gemara. Lalapes bahenes hapas. These are various dip items. So if chicken is not a dip item, gefilte fish is not a dip item. And Shulchan Aruch is very clear about this. Lalapes, hainu dvarim shebderech likbaya suda lamb, check. Boy machma suda, second thing, check. Lalapes bahenes hapas. It's true. The Shulchan Aruch says even if you're not dipping into it, but it's still something you're supposed to be dipping the bread. Meaning, what does that all mean? It means that the reason why everything is a tafel is because bread is being the staff of life that it is. Everything surrounds it, and since everything surrounds it, so one bracha takes care of everything. But we don't do this. So the Mishnah Berurah explains in the Sharat Tziyun, the Mishnah Berurah explains that we're going to drop that condition. Lalapes says hapas, drop it. It doesn't have to be, even though the Rishonim say it, he says he found Rishonim to say differently, that this requirement of it having to be a dip in order to be kolol in the Hamotzi does not apply. He brings a proof to it from daisa. If you're eating daisa in the middle of the meal, that's like oatmeal or farina or something like that. So if you take daisa very thick, nobody's dipping into it. Mishnah Berurah says nobody's spreading it. It's just there. You're just eating it. And I would say Kal v'chomer with your gefilte fish tonight. Nobody's dipping into the gefilte fish. So he drops this condition. So as long as it's part of the suda, as long as it's like a regular thing to eat in the suda, and it's bayin machma suda, which we'll have to explain more. You're yotze with the hamotzi, as we all know, and you don't need the requirement of it's a spread. You don't need the requirement of it's a dip, but you do need the requirement that it's a normal thing to eat in the suda. I just say a theory, bear with me on this, that some Rishonim are very adamant about, no, it has to be a dip in order to be a motzi. Others, Mr. Berurah brings, are not. And this may be largely cultural, because if you'll watch like a Middle Eastern dish, so it's a big piece of lafa, well, lafes is hapas. There's a big piece of lafa, and then they take this dip, that dip, the next dip. In America we didn't grow up with all these dips, but here it's a thing. You have dips. You go even to a wedding, it's all dips. So it's like a Middle Eastern idea that the main thing is your pita, and then you dip that into the bread. In other cultures, I don't know what they did in Poland here, but in other cultures, rest a shtickle fleisch. The bread, you could almost forget about the bread by the time you get to the fish. So can you dip it? Can't you dip it? But it's not a sandwich. So it could be that all of this has to do with what is your das. And what your das is always has to do with what what everybody does. So it's possible. I'm just positing. It's possible that even the machlokes rishonim has to do with what was natural das to have in those days. That's just a theory. You can take it or leave it. Have a good shot. We're continuing in Hilchos Brachos, and here the Shulchan Aruch in Kufayin Zayin tells us a klal that we all know and use regularly, and that is that if you wash on bread, Chazal understood such an importance for lechem, that whatever you eat in that meal becomes a tafel to the ikar of the bread, and you don't make any brachos on it. So the Shulchan Aruch continues, and he says, "V'imhem dvarim habayim shaloi machmas asuda." But what if you just randomly eat something in the middle of the meal that has nothing to do with a suda? What is a suda? A suda is something which is soed, something that's there to fill you up. It's a meal. So let's say right between the soup and the fish, you decide to eat ice cream. So, or fruit. So what's the halacha? These are not things which are normally there for a meal. Who's to decide what's normally in a meal, what's not normally in a meal? The answer is that a meal means it's coming to satiate you, and other things come for different reasons. Let's say to leave a good taste in your mouth, or entertainment, or whatever the reason is, but it's not about satiation. So those kind of things, that's called dvarim habayim shaloi machmas hasuda. That part of the satiation process. Ein derech likvaya suda aleim. You don't sit and just eat that for lunch, or lalafis v'amas hapas. You see, this is tricky because culturally, for instance, fruit. The Shulchan Aruch is going to say fruit is not boim lalefas hapas. It's not coming for suda saka, but it's very common, at least in our culture, to take a piece of bread and to put raspberry jam on it. And the more raspberries you see there, the better. So that is lalefas hapas. That is boim machmas suda. That's the whole suda. So you have to look a little bit at what your culture is and what the culture of the world is. But at least when the Shulchan Aruch says it, he's saying fruit is not part of a meal. He says even if you cook afilu peris mevushalim, even if they're cooked fruit, like you eat applesauce or something like that in the middle of the meal, no, you have to make a bracha. Pears don't come, and he says even if it's mixed in with the meat, like you're eating some kind of a tzimis, you have to make a bracha. Now he brings the Mishnah Berurah brings. Not everybody agrees with that. That's why we don't do it. The Chai Adam says, no, it doesn't work like that. The fruit and the tzimis is bottled to the meat, and then the meat is bottled to the bread. And he says there's a chain of bittul going on here, so you don't have to make a bracha on the raisins but that's like a special heter. Then Mishnah Berurah says maybe another svara that if it's mixed in with meat, let's say, or potatoes, then it's made for masain. But what we see is that if you're eating dessert in the middle of the meal, you have to make a bracha. If you're eating something which is not lispaya, not baderech hasuda, not balikvaya b'emes hasuda, you have to make a bracha. I'll tell you a case that in the world of chefs, they speak about cleansing the palate. So cleansing the palate is kind of when you eat something, it's a restart on your taste buds, and now you can eat further. So we don't do this at home mostly, but if you go to a fancy multi-course meal, so you eat one thing, and then you don't really appreciate let's say the meat that they're going to put out. So they cleanse the palate usually with sorbet. That's the minhag. Having made many yeshiva dinners, I know that they like to do this. They like to cleanse your palate for you. Now, we do this all the time because on Shabbos, most people, you're not supposed to eat fish and meat together. So most people have, let's say, fish at the beginning of their Shabbos meal, and then they have a soup or meat or whatever you have. And the minhag Yisrael is to cleanse the palate. The minhag Yisrael is to take either a drink or eat some food or some people who are really machmer and they have schnapps. Schnapps is a good palate cleanser, and they do that before. Now, is that schnapps or drink, is that boin machma suda or shloi boin machma suda? Lo shamanu, you should make a bracha on that because, of course, it's part of the suda. This is how you get from the fish to the meat. Now, if you were a chef, you would not be serving water or schnapps. You would be serving raspberry sorbet in the middle of your meal. Probably most people don't do this. I shouldn't say most people do because I never took a poll on it, but I don't do it. Nobody eats like a sorbet or sherbet or some kind of ice cream, tofuti in the middle of their meal to cleanse the palate. But if you did, let's say you're at a suda at a wedding or something, and you did, so that's a case, I believe, of boin machma suda. The whole thing is all about the suda. This is how the sequence of the suda goes, as opposed to taking that very, very same thing, some fruit, a fruit dish, and eating it at the end of the meal. So that's called dessert. So once it's called dessert, or in Lashon of the Mishnah Berurah, or in modern Hebrew, it's called a kinuach. And what that's for is to cleanse the palate, but not to make it able to eat something else, but that's it. I don't want to walk away with a foodie taste in my mouth. So that's considered something else. It's loy boy bachmas suda. You don't make a suda on that. That's just like a final sweet thing at the end of the suda. So I just want to say this. That's my introduction. In this particular siman Kufayin Zayin, so at the end of the siman, the Mishnah Berurah says, it's very interesting. He says, why are these things so complicated? So he says, I've written for you a kitzer dinei brachos b'suda. And he says, let me just put it all in one place. So we will learn the kitzer dinei instead of getting through all the details of it. We'll learn together the kitzer dinei peris haboyin b'toich hasuda. The whole section that the Mishnah Berurah wrote of a kitzer. Continuing in Hilchos Brachos, the Mishnah Berurah in Kufayin Zayin is very clear that if you eat fruit in a meal, particularly at the end of the meal, dessert, so you have to make a bar priya eitz, even though you washed and you made a Hamotzi and smotzi everything. And he says clearly in the Sha'ar Tzion, obvious example of this is if you eat like applesauce, kompot, lifkan, here it's called, at the end of the meal, you have to make a bar priya eitz, very borer in the Mishnah Berurah. So make a bar priya eitz. It's depending on also the texture of the applesauce. Sometimes the applesauce you make a Shehakol, sometimes you make a bar priya eitz, but you make a bracha. That's our point here. In this sefer, Say Shehakol, he says, Kasser Rav Moshe Sternbach, that Rav Moshe Sternbach Shlita says, Shemanu edus nemana halacha lemaisa. We've heard very clear testimony. Shebeziknusai chazer by Baal HaMishnah Berurah uba'atzmai berach al kompot. Here's one to give us clarity. The Chafetz Chaim was after he wrote the Mishnah Berurah. He says here that he had charata and he decided you do not make a bracha on applesauce at the end of the meal. The Briskers, he writes, Hamar agrees, they would eat applesauce with bread. Okay, you want to do that? And there's all kinds of different things that people do because we have a contradiction between what it says in the Mishnah Berurah, which is posek achrod, to what it says, what we heard that he did. He writes here. He writes here that Lamaisa, there are some people that do believe the story, some people that don't believe the story, so we're in total confusion. So I want to share with you something that I just read recently, and that is that one of the people that said that the Chafetz Chaim changed their mind was Rav Lapian. That's how. Rav Lapian said that the Chafetz Chaim did not make a bracha. He said, Eidos, he did not make a bracha on applesauce at the end of the meal. Again, even though he says clearly in the Mishnah Berurah. And he said another case which I don't want to go into now is if you drink tea or eat cake at the end of the meal. But let's talk about the applesauce. So Rabbi Lapian, this is in the Lev Eliyahu in the Hakdama. the Rabbi Yaacov reported this edus and said that nobody should make a bracha, but then he said, this is, I'm reading this from I finally found it written from an alon. You should not make a bracha. Chavetz Chaim changed his mind. V'nigla elav Chavetz Chaim b'chaloim halayla. V'yamar eloi madua ato omer b'shmi halachos. That the why are you saying something that I didn't say? I wrote in the Mishnah Berurah you should make a bracha. Why are you saying over halachas? So Rabbi Yaacov had a dream that he should stop saying this halacha. Like, wow. Masha kasavti, the Chavetz Chaim said in this dream, Masha kasavti b'Mishnah Berurah hu ha'ikar. Now they asked Rav Chaim Kanievsky, it's, how applesauce brings us into a whole you can make a movie about it. But they asked Rav Chaim Kanievsky, what's the halacha? So he said that the stipler made a bracha. His father made a bracha on applesauce, but he said it's befurish in the Noda B'Yehuda in the Shiva Siyad. One of the last sefer the Noda B'Yehuda wrote was the Shiva Siyad, wrote with his grandson, I think. So he says, just look there. So if you look at that Noda B'Yehuda, it doesn't talk about it at all. He talks about what do you do when there's a stira between what somebody wrote and what somebody said. That was his Bar Yaakov, and there it says clearly you go by what he wrote, not by what he said, because who knows? Like you could hear this shmua, you could hear that shmua. So it seems to be, Reb Chaim Kanievsky, Rabbi Yaacov Haber, most poskim paskin that you should listen to the Mishnah Berurah, and listening to the Mishnah Berurah means that you make a bracha on applesauce, even though, what's the even though here? Even though it's so ragil for it to be part of the Suda, particularly in many homes, European homes, like it's not even thinkable to end a meal without kompot at the end. That's the way you end this. And even though it's cooked, and even though there's all kinds of drushes of why the Chavetz Chaim would have changed his mind, but Lamaisa, this is what he wrote. You make a bracha at the end of a meal. Continuing with Hilchos Brachos. First of all, does everybody know what a krambo is? You know what that is? So a krambo is an Israeli piece of junk that it's a sort of a wafer, like a cookie, and then it has this sugar cream and is covered with chocolate. That's usually the way it is. So it comes an inexpensive thing because it's not custard or something like that. It's just the sugar stuff, a little bit of a chocolate dip, and this cracker underneath. So I was personally present when Rav Scheinberg, Sefer Tzaddik Levracha, was sitting next to Rav Gusman, Sefer Tzaddik Levracha, two tzaddikim, two great poskim. They were sitting together at a bris, I think it was, and somebody brought them a krambo. What bracha do you make on this krambo? You get a creme bo. That's creme bo. So what bracha do you make on it? And it was, we wish that we had these kind of cell phones where you could take pictures, but it was like a 10-minute dissection. Take it out. This is the Ikar. This is the Ikar. No, people eat it because of the cookie. People eat it because of the cream. It's really the chocolate. It's all both together. You make two brachas, one bracha, no bracha, throw it in the garbage. There was a whole tumult about this. I have no recollection at all as to how they came out. But the same question would be, for instance, with an ice cream cone. You don't have to go all the way to a krambo. You eat an ice cream cone, so you have the cone, and you have the ice cream inside of it. So now the question is, do you make a shehakol on the ice cream? That seems pretty obvious. Mezonos usually make a mezonos on just like we make a hamotzi on a sandwich, or do we say that that mezonos there has no other, it's just an edible piece of paper, meaning it's only there so that your hands don't get dirty? That's the question. Then you would make no bracha on it at all. This is very interesting in this Sefer Halachos of Brachos. So here he says about this, Most people eat ice cream cones to enhance the taste of the ice cream. I don't, he took a poll or he looked on the internet. How does he know why most people, I don't even know why I eat ice cream cones. I don't, but I've never analyzed it. Therefore, the ice cream would require Shehakol, and the cone, even though it's a tuffle, will require Bar Mezonos. However, if you're one of the great exceptions in this life, however, if one were to use an ice cream cone merely in place of a cup, to hold the ice cream and keep his hands from becoming soiled, rather than to enjoy its flavor, the cone would not require a separate bracha. That's what he says. Again, I don't know how he knows what most people do, and what most people's kavana is. I doubt if an analysis or a poll has been done on this. But I want to say that's what he says, but the Mishnah Berurah says it a little bit different. Mishnah Berurah says in Kuf Samach Sif Ches, the Mishnah Berurah says there that it's a little bit different. If you would take the case of an ice cream cone, he brings something similar with apples. So let's take the case of an ice cream cone. If you would eat the cone as a nash onto itself, like you don't necessarily, it's nice to have ice cream on it, but it's like a cracker. You eat the cracker. People eat crackers with cheese. People eat crackers without cheese. A cracker is a cracker, and you make a Bar Mezonos on it. Same thing is with, I believe, the same thing is with a pita. For instance, people eat pitas. They use it as bread. So the fact that you put falafel on it, it's hard to make it into a tuffle. So the question becomes, with ice cream cones or the bottoms of a crumbo, is it something, according to Mishnah Berurah, is it something that you would eat on its own and not necessarily with the cream on top or with the ice cream on top? So then you make a mezonos on it. If it's something, you don't eat this is simply a cup. It's simply a way to do it. So then you wouldn't make a bracha on it. So the Mishnah Berurah is slightly different than the way he puts it. He's quoting Igros Moshe there. But the Mishnah Berurah is a good klal. Like, you have to ask yourself, I don't know what most people do, I just don't know the answer to that, but what you have to ask yourself is this something that you would eat? Like, would you go into your closet and just eat ice cream cones, as an example? You probably, by the way, would eat, I'm imagining, like the bottom of a crumbo is just like a regular cookie. So why not? People eat cookies. Ice cream cone, I haven't seen, but I haven't investigated it. But that would be the way to look at the halach and decide what's right for you in this bracha. We learned a couple of times, we went over to halacha that anything that has in it the chameshes minei dagan, wheat, rye, etc., spelt. So you make a Bar Mezonos at the beginning and an alamichi at the end. And if you turn it into a bread or something, your kaveya sudan, it upgrades even to Hamotzi. So I want to speak about two exceptions to the rule that are very important exceptions, and it affects us. It may affect you daily. Number one is that's talking about where you process the grain in the way that it's meant to be processed. In other words, like you take wheat, you grind it up, and you bake it. The Gemara says clearly in Brachos, "Hakoisei says hachita," that if you're just chewing on a piece of wheat, so then it's just like every other vegetable, it's ha'adama. So the Shulchan Aruch, going all the way through from the Gemara to the Shulchan Aruch, says that any time you process a piece of wheat and it still remains a piece of wheat. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a piece of wheat. You toast it, you cook it, but it remains a piece of wheat. So the bracha stays ha'adama. There's a lot of applications here, mostly for breakfast cereals that we have to talk about. But one point is that we're talking about when you process the wheat completely, then it becomes a mezonos or hamotzi. Now the other thing is, which we need to explore with cereals. I just want to say one word about breakfast cereals, that you might think you know the halacha, or I might think I know the halacha, but every few months they change the recipes. So what it means to say is that it could be it has it at like bread. There's all kinds of things that it's in there. But let me more important this halacha, which will show you. The halacha is that the wheat, when you say the chameshes minei dagan, we're not talking about. That's not talking about the outer layers of it, which is what we call bran. The bran is outside. It's almost like a shell. There's the outside shell. It's the husk you throw away. Can't eat that. But then there's like imagine a peanut. It's a very similar idea. You have the part that's impossible to eat, but then you have a number of levels of wrappings that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us on the peanut until you get to the peanut. Each one is protecting it in a different way. So we're not talking about the outside one. That's like a corrugated cardboard box. You don't eat that. That you throw away. But underneath that, it's all edible, the various degrees of edible. When the Chazal say, Chameshes Midei Dagan, they're not talking about the bran. The bran is like the outside most, it's still edible, but it's the most outside part. So that's not a Bari Mina Mezonos. It'll never become Hamotzi. That, because it's not the Ikar V'tafel, is always a Shehakol. So for instance, if you eat bran cereal, so bran cereal is going to be a Shehakol. I want to show you one thing interesting. Rav Moshe Feinstein on the Igros Moshe. So in Even Ezer, which not a place for Hilchos Brachos, under the halachas, he has a halacha of Yosem Rosh Perua B'zman Hazeh, L'gabe Gittin, what happens if a woman doesn't cover her hair, does she lose her ksuva, what happens about saying Kriya Shema in the house, and is Hilchos Tumas Yadayim in current bathrooms, and what bracha do you make on Rice Krispies? All in one tshuva. So he says here, Binyan bracha al min cereal shenikra cornflakes. He goes into cornflakes and Rice Krispies. There's a couple of lines here. So one of the things he says, which is important for us, Ibhu me haklipos, if the cereal is made from klipos. Klipos is the bran or the outside layer of the grain. Tzarich levarich shehakol. You always make a shehakol on it. This should be pashut, but Rav Moshe says it, so there's no doubt about it. Now I don't know if you look at, let's say, raisin bran. Does that have also in it? It certainly has raisins, but does it have flour? Does it have wheat? You have to know exactly what that is to know whether you'll make a shehakol or whether you'll make a hadama. Very confusing, and you got to check that. There's a big difference between raisin bran in Israel and raisin bran in America, etc. And the truth is, I'm not going to go through the list of cereals. You can go online and look at the list of cereals, but I just want to say the yesodus of it. So if it's bran, and if then it's a shehakol. If it's actually grain, but it's not processed in the regular way, eating baked, it's not baked, granola bars will be a big question, so then you make hadama. But pas means that you've ground it, and you've processed it, and you've baked it. That's what mezonos and hamotzi means. Continuing along in the halachas of brachos, so the Gemara says, and we learned in halacha, that anything that has the chameshes minei dagan, anything that has the chameshes minei dagan, wheat, oats, melt, barley, rye. So you make a mezonos on it, and then at the end you make an ala michya, and if you turn it into a pas, you make hamotzi. We've learned that a couple of times. That's talking about when you've processed the wheat. So if you didn't process the wheat, let's just say you take a piece of wheat, and you chew it. So then it's just like eating a peanut. So you make a bari pri hadama. On such a case, you make a bari pri hadama, and the poskim explain that's true if you toast it, if you puff it, if you make cereal out of it, whatever you're doing. If you're not processing it and making it into a mezonos, so then it remains hadama. That's the rule. I want to point out that this rule of like when you cook it, you make a mezonos, or when you bake it, you make a mezonos. It's not about cooking and baking. It's very important. Cooking and baking is just a hechatimsa of getting it to become a mush, meaning you lose the fact that we're talking about a piece of wheat, and you graduated it to a new thing called a cookie or a piece of bread. Just very similar to bread. Bread, wheat is wheat, and bread, you don't even know you're eating wheat, really. Bread is a new thing. Bread, a piece of cake is a new thing. You make a batter out of it, you make dough out of it, it's a whole different story. But cooking is the way you usually get it together, but it's not necessarily the point. The point is, and this is very important to know, for all halachas, for all future halachas. The issue is that you've made it into some kind of a mush and some kind of a new bria where it's no longer nicker what it is you're eating. The same thing is true, the Gemara says, with rice. Rice is rice grows from the ground, bar pri hadama. That's if you eat a piece of rice. If you take the rice and you make a cake out of it, so then you would make a bari mine mezonos. It would, even though at the end it's a very unique thing, rice, because at the end you make a bari defashos, because of a shiloh of the Gemara. But you make a bari mine mezonos on rice if you've taken it out of the class of koses ha-orez. If you're just chewing on a piece of rice, let's talk about something like Rice Krispies at some future time, what's going on over there. The poskim say that this rice, if you cook it together, you made it into a maisa kedera, it graduates into a barei bidei mezonos. However, if you toast it, let's say, or pop it, or you puff it, or do whatever you do, but not turn it into a maisa kedera, it remains a barei pri hadama. Am I clear? In other words, so the rice has to be cooked in order for it all to become like one zlub, and then once it becomes one thing, so then it graduates to a bari mina mezonos, and that's the bracha. We should make a bari mina mezonos. What bracha do you make on a rice cake? Let's just let's just decide that this morning. What bracha do you make on a rice cake? So very interesting. What's common to make on a rice cake? I'm not talking about rice cakes that have fruit involved with it or vegetable. Just a rice cake, a simple rice cake. Rice cake, by the way, has no water in the process. Generally speaking, no water in the process. You take rice, you puff it up, and then it's stuck together, usually by the rice starch and a machine. So that's how a rice cake is made. So what bracha do you make on a rice cake? So this is interesting. Rabbi Yaakov says you make a mezonos. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says you make kavana. There's a sefer Vizos HaBracha says you should only eat it when you wash. You should eat a rice cake. That's always the answer when you don't know what to do. You can wash. Rav Belsky said in the name of Rav Moshe that you make a bari b'nei mezonos, even though Rav Moshe himself writes that you should make kavana. So what's the story with this rice cake? I think it's safe to say the bracha is a mezonos on a rice cake, and the reason is because it becomes a cracker, it becomes a cookie, it becomes like a piece of bread almost. So people use it as a replacement for bread. What's the reason to make adama? Because you can still see the rice itself goes self. It's puffed. The issue is not whether it's cooked or it's not cooked, because it's not cooked. Rice cakes are not cooked. But since you took rice and you turned it into a cookie or some kind of a kichel, so then, according to Rabbi Yaakov, it graduated to a barei mina mezonos. According to others, it didn't graduate; it still remains ha'adama. Personally, I make a barei mina mezonos on rice cakes. But more important is I want to tell you what the lumdus of it and the very confusing lumdus, and now try to figure out. For homework, why the poskim almost all say that you should make a bari mina mezonos on Rice Krispies. The riddle of the day. If there's a shaila, what bracha you make on a rice cake where it becomes a cake, on Rice Krispies, almost everybody says to make a bari. Rabbi Yaakov, Rav Shlomo Zalman, if you look at this book, Vizos HaBracha, just straight across, Rice Krispies, you make a mezonos. Let's discuss why. Continuing in Hilchos Brachos, yesterday I asked the question, why, when it comes to eating a rice cake, there seems to be a big machlokas for whether you make a hadama on it, a mezonos on it, a shehakol on it. Rabbi Yaakov said to make a mezonos, or Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says to make a hadama. Machlokas. When it comes to Rice Krispies, you look in all the poskim, everybody says to make a mezonos on Rice Krispies. So what's the difference between rice cakes and Rice Krispies? The simple answer is rice cakes have not been cooked in water, and Rice Krispies have. You might say that's simple. It took me an hour and a half to figure that out. Rice Krispies are rice ground up into a flour, cooked, added sugar, reshaped by a machine into what you see as a Rice Krispie. There's not a piece of rice you're seeing, it's just an image. And then, so that's cooked. So once something's cooked, you've brought the rice to its full potential, and on rice that reaches its full potential, Chazal say that on oires you make a borei mine mezonos, and surprisingly, borei nefashos at the end. This is a very interesting thing in general. I might have mentioned this yesterday or the day before, that usually borei mine mezonos or Hamotzi is on chameshes mine dogon, on the 5 grains. Chazal, kimlem lechazal, that ores is a davar hamasbia, like maybe the whole China lives off this stuff. So since it's a davar hamasbia, Chazal had a kabbalah, you make a borei mine mezonos on that also. This is not true if you make different bean things or whatever. Specifically, it didn't buy rice. Now, just one thing here. The Shulchan Aruch says in Reish Ches, hakoses es haores. Let's say one would just take a piece of rice and chew on it. Now, we already know this is following the halacha of a koses es achita. So if you take a piece of wheat and you chew on it, so you make a borei pri adama, and if you cook it and make it into a maisa kedera, then you make a borei mine mezonos. That's the halacha with wheat. What's the halacha with rice? Same going along the same process. So and it's a chiddush because rice raw, I don't even think it's edible. I don't. But there is a case in Shulchan Aruch of ha-koises es ha-oires, that if you just chew on a raw piece of oires, mevarech ala borei pri adama, says the Shulchan Aruch. You make a borei pri adama on it. V'acharav borei nefashos. V'im bishloi, and if you've cooked that rice, ad shenismaich, until it becomes soft, or you grind it up, asin menupas, mevarech ala borei mine mezonos v'acharav borei nefashos. So here you have the case of the rice cake, because the case of the rice cake is you take raw rice and you puff it like popcorn, right? You just puff it up, you toast it until it becomes a rice cake. And apparently, according to my research, it's the rice starch, and actually, usually good ones, actually the ingredients within the rice itself, which makes it stick together through heat. But there's never a bishul. It never goes through a water process. Do you remember on Pesach how we spoke about B&D rice cakes? That according to the Betty Poskim, correct Poskim, I believe, that they have rice cakes that are not kidneys. We don't eat rice on Pesach Ashkenazim, but they have rice cakes that are not kidneys. Why? Because they've never come in contact with water ever. Shmura, rice cake shmura. So those rice cake shmura, this is the Rav Shulchan Aruch says, well, kidneys can't be any worse than the wheat itself. You're allowed to eat wheat on matzah is made out of wheat. You're allowed to eat wheat on Pesach, so you're allowed to eat rice on Pesach as long as it never came in contact with water. Here's the story, that with the rice cakes, it does not come in contact with what would have to be hot water. Hot water would have to be mevushal to turn into mezonos. So therefore, there are poskim like Rav Shlomo Zalman that says that, listen, if it didn't come into contact with hot water, you didn't make a maisa kedera out of it, so then the right thing to do is to make a borei pri adama. Came Moshe Feinstein and Rabbi Yaacov said, look, it became a piece of cake. It became a cracker. So how could you say that you make a hadama on a cracker? And they both said, hadas nota, that you should make a borei mezonos. By the way, one last thing, Rav Shlomo Zalman also agrees with that. He says maybe it is a mezonos. However, this is a little chiddush here that I want to say from him. Maybe it's a mezonos, but it was for sure a borei pri adama at some point in its life, this rice cake. So it was a vadai borei pri adama, Safek borei mine mezonos, and Safek, this is something I just learned from him, Safek Brachos Lehakel means go back to the previous bracha that it for sure was. It's a chiddush in halacha. Go back one. So that's why he says, why should you make a borei mine mezonos when it's a Safek? Go back to what it certainly is, which is a borei pri adama. It means something like that when you make a borei mine mezonos out of rice cake or something like that, it's kolel within it, the borei pri adama. It's like an upgrade. It would be the same thing with Hamotzi lechem and arts. It's kolel the adama. All these things are kolel one and the other. So that's so please go home and enjoy your Rice Krispies. Morning. We're continuing in Hilchos Brachos. according to the feedback that I'm getting, which is a lot, seems to be very confusing. I apologize for that. But I want to try to make it summarize and make it very clear right now. I hope I don't make it more confusing. The granola bars. What bracha do you make on granola bars? So interesting, I just looked at the OU website and the Star K website. The OU website says Rav Belsky and Rav Shechter, two great poskim, both say that you make a borei pri hadama. Why do they say you make a borei pri hadama? Very simple, because hachoses is achita. A granola bar is toasted oats. That's what it is. So hachoses is achita never went out of the chamisha mine dagam as adama, and it grows from the ground. So you make hadama. Simple as that. The fact that they stuck it together in a bar doesn't mean anything. So they say you make hadama. I looked at the Star K, and it says there in Rabbi Heinemann, name of Rabbi Heinemann, that it's his opinion that most granola bars, he named, including Nature Valley granola bars and Quaker granola bars, I guess he shops in Costco's, those two kinds for sure. He's looked at it, they give hashgacha. He pointed out that we should know that all granola bars on the market are less than 50% oats. I don't know how that affects this halacha, but it's not actually like you're eating oats. It's less than 50%, but nevertheless, he says you should make a mezonos. Why? So now that I took away the confusion, Rabbi Heinemann says on a granola bar you make a mezonos, and Rabbi Belsky says, and Rabbi Shechter says you make a hadama. So what's the issue? So the issue is very simple. And after that, it's once you know the issue, it's just hashar. If you take a oat out of the ground, you make a bar and eat it live. You eat it, what's the word, raw. So then you make hadama. Bar pri hadama, grow on the ground. It has not reached its full potential, or any of its potential, when you eat it raw. What Chazal saw from the Torah, the beauty of oats and wheat and that type of stuff, what they saw was the ability, you can make cake out of this, you can make bread out of it. It's amazing how all the things, even things we don't like the gluten and things like that, it's just an amazing nest, but if you just eat it raw, you miss the point. So therefore, you make hadama, and once you make it into a cake or a bread, you make a mezonos or hamotzi. What makes it into a cake or a bread? The answer is, these are the two key words, maisa kedera. If you bring it together, usually by cooking, that makes it into a maisa kedera. You've just elevated your oat or your wheat up to a tachlistic thing by making a maisa kedera, and it turns into a mezonos. You make it into a bread, turns into hamotzi. Granola bars, the question that they're asking, all the poskim are asking, is a granola bar, everybody has one, everybody's seen one, everybody's eaten one. When you look at a granola bar, is that a maisa kedera or is it not a maisa kedera? It's a very simple question. As much as they're disagreeing on whether it's a maisa kedera, the question that they're asking is that has this been brought together to further its purpose for Hashem's creating? So Rabbi Heinemann pointed out that he says, his words, it's processed enough to be a maisa kedera and to be a mezonos. Meaning, and this is a deep thing, that usually, how does something become a maisa kedera? Kishmai kainu, you put it on the stove, kedera, and you mix it together. But that is only a hechatimsa to bring it to its fruition. It's not the cooking is the usual way, the regular way, a good way to make a bunch of grains into a cooking, baking, batter, dough. That's true, but it doesn't mean it's the only way. If there's a technology, says Rabbi Heinemann, if there's a technology which is bringing it together by toasting it and by using this 51% of other stuff and maybe its own starch or whatever is coming and it's sticking it together, dayenu becomes a mezonos. Rav Shechter and Rav Belsky come and say, no, we only have a Kabbalah and one thing in Chazal, Ma'aseh Kedera, is Al Yedei Bishul or Afiyah. Afiyah means after you combine it together and make it into a dough or a batter. Those are the two ways to do it. Then you cook it, you bake it, you process it in a normal kind of way. So I'm not going to say what the halacha is. I make a Mezonos on it, but whatever your minhag is. But what I want to convey more is what the yisoid is. When you look at something made out of the chameshes minei dagan, or rice even, which is not one of the chameshes minei dagan, you have to look and consider one thing. You have to know whether it's a ma'aseh kedera or it's not a ma'aseh kedera. That's the area of iyun, whether it's a ma'aseh kedera or not a ma'aseh kedera. And once you know if it's a ma'aseh kedera or not, if it's been bound together in some type of a regular way and it's become elevated to something different than what it was when you picked it up in the field, so then you make a bari min Mezonos. If you turn it into pas, you make it into a Hamotzi lech. What I'd like to do is just sum up the last week or so of shiurim of brachas on breakfast cereals, and let's just take 3 minutes to do a little bit of brachos B to make sure that we understand everything. Just go through the cereals that I could think of last night. Number 1, cornflakes. What bracha do you make on cornflakes? So it depends what country you're in. Because if you live in the United States, they take pieces of corn, they make flakes, you put them in milk and you make a bar priadoma because that's the bracha you make on corn. If you buy Israeli cornflakes, they take the corn, they grind it up, they make a flour out of it, you put milk on it. It's completely Shehakol because it's not nicker at all that it's corn. So what you have to do if you're not sure if you're Israeli or American, so you keep 1.5 days or something like that. So what you have to do is look at the ingredients and see if it has corn flour or if it has corn flakes, actual corn flakes. Number 1, Bran, pure Bran. Pure Bran, what bracha do you make? Shehakol, because it's not really part of the wheat. If it was part of the wheat, so achita, you would make hadama, right? But this is not it's not part of the wheat. It's the klipa of the wheat. It's the outside part of the wheat, and therefore you make a Shehakol. Raisin bran, not plain raisin bran. You may not do they have an Israeli brand of that? I don't know, but raisin bran, we're all familiar with raisin bran. So on that you make a Mezonos, and the reason you make a Mezonos, even though it's bran, you should make a Shehakol, but it's not just bran. If you investigate it even slightly, you'll see that it's they take bran, they mix it with flour. It's probably more wheat flour than there is, part of the wheat than there is the bran itself. They cook it together. It makes a ma'aseh kedera. Once it's a ma'aseh kedera, it's a borei minei Mezonos. What about the raisins? The raisins are for taste. By the way, on their own website, they say that the raisins work with bran because bran is bitter, and raisins is, instead of putting so much sugar, they put in raisins. It's like sneaking sugar into it. So it's definitely a tuffle. Oatmeal, as we know it, cooked oatmeal is a clear case of taking oats, which is one of the chameshes minei dagan, making it into a ma'aseh kedera, cooking them into one, and then eating them. So that's for sure a borei minei Mezonos. Somebody mentioned here, to remember who, that their minhag is to take raw oats, pour milk on it, and eat it that way, each to their own. So that would be, the bracha on that type of oatmeal would be a borei pri Ha'adama, because it's not cooked and there's no ma'aseh kedera. Cheerios is made out of oats, and it is also processed, and it's made into a flour. And once it's made into a flour, and then they reshape it into a Cheerio. So in that case, Cheerio, the O stands for oats. In that case, you make a borei minei Mezonos. So just go back for a second when I think of it. With the cornflakes, one of the ways you can know if it's made out of flour, if it's reprocessed or not, is just hold 2 of them up and see if they look exactly the same, because they have a factory making oat flakes, so then they all look the same. But if they're genuine oat flakes, so then cornflakes, then each one will have a different shape. But that's true of a lot of things. That's how you can tell. Rice Krispies, so is a simple Mezonos, because Rice Krispies, the Gemara says that on rice you make a Mezonos, and Rice Krispies has been cooked. They take the rice, they cook it, they process it, and then again they make things that look something like rice, but it has nothing to do with rice pieces at all. So it's clearly a ma'aseh kedera, and you make a mezonos. I hope everybody's writing all this down. What bracha do you make on soup nuts if you eat them straightforward without the soup? Somebody have an idea? Why? Because they're wheat. It's wheat, pieces of wheat. That's what soup nuts are. They're cooked, so that's a ma'aseh kedera. They're fried, and from that I saw a video. They make like a big gigantic, like a pizza of soup nut material. After they fry it, and then the machine comes and cuts them into soup nuts. So that's for sure a bar mina mezonos. It could be with the soup is a different halacha that it would become batel. What about granola? Not granola bars. Granola itself is a clear case of ha'adama. It's oats. The main ingredient of granola is oats. Oats that are not put into a ma'aseh kedera, not cooked completely. So then the halacha is you make a borei pri ha'adama, and that's what that is. All the poskim say that oats that are toasted, just toasted, which is what granola is, even though you put other things in it, it's a tuffle, so you make a borei pri ha'adama. What about granola bars? So granola bars, we learned that's already a big machlokes between the poskim manenu, and what what the question there is when you take granola and you put it into a bar, is that called a ma'aseh kedera or not? Whatever the process of it is beyond our scope right now. But so some poskim say you make a mezonos, some poskim say because it's all stuck together. Rabbi Heinemann says you make a mezonos on it, and the OU says you make a hadama on it. It's not that stuck together. That's a granola bar. Rice cake, very similar situation. A rice cake is a hadama. Kosei says ha'ores, you make a borei pri hadama, the Shulchan Aruch says, and reish ches. So you would make hadama unless you cook it. And it's the same thing. Was it really cooked or was it not cooked? It's not like a Rice Krispie where it's cooked. It's not really cooked, but it is stuck together, and some poskim feel it's stuck together enough to, and again, Rav Belsky from the OU said Rav Moshe would have seen our rice cakes, it would have said a mezonos. That's the psak. But at the same time, this works sort of the other way around. Rav Heinemann says, do you make a hadama? In any of these cases, mezonos hadama, Rav Shlomo Zalman says multiple choice. Make what you want. Make what you want. Or if you want to be very ultra orthodox, so you eat something else, which is something else which is hadama. And lastly, farina. Farina is made out of wheat, so it's oatmeal, but it's not oatmeal; it's wheat meal. So what's halacha there? Clearly, a mezonos, the same thing as oatmeal. You're taking it, you're cooking it. It's kedera, and you would make a mezonos. When I don't know if they still have it. I haven't eaten cereal in many years, but they're in yeshiva. They used to give us something called shalva. Anybody know what that is? You don't want to know. What?
Is the puffed rice one? Puffed rice?
Puffed wheat. Puffed wheat.
Sugar smacks.
And a lot of sugar.
Yeah.
So what's the deal? I was just thinking about it now. So this shalva, that's what they used to give us, big bowls of shalva with milk. That was breakfast of champions. So the halach is what? It's kosei sachita. It's a simple case of kosei sachita, and the bracha would be borei pri ha'adama. A good Erev Shabbos.